So artificial intelligence presents us with a unique opportunity as humans to redefine and reimagine our intelligence, our empathy, in fact, every aspect of our lives. So today I hope to tell you a few stories about how we can retrieve what I consider to be authentic intelligence in the face of a new frontier of artificial intelligence. Of course, with that in mind, it's important to say, and I'm going to show you many pictures today, that there are, in fact, many other intelligences. Some of you may already know that some years ago in the early 90s, there was some talk about emotional intelligence. What kind of qualities should people have or develop that could lead them to be more empathetic or compassionate, to have more social skills? Perhaps you know of Howard Gardner's works where he defines 7 different types of intelligences. Turns out there are many different ways that people could express skill sets in music or skill sets linguistically or to be interpersonal in some way. So people can share different types of intelligences, it turns out. That leads us, therefore, to a very natural conversation about what authentic intelligence could really mean and how it's uniquely designed and uniquely aimed at humanness and what it means to be a human in our world today. And it turns out that to be a human in our world today, we actually need to pay attention to non-humans in stories. I have some adorable creatures here that some of you may be familiar with. These all come from, of course, the movie Star Wars, some of them more fuzzy and furry than others. But today, I want to talk to you about a variety of stories that are drawn from literature and also from cinema. And what I've done is to identify what I think are some qualities that can be paired with each of these stories that are representative of the way that we can return to ourselves and to our humanity. So you'll see I've chosen stories about animals, stories about aliens, stories about robots, stories about demons, and stories about monsters. And each one of them, as you can see, evokes a different quality. It's only when we are placed in front of the non-human in these particular tales are we offered an opportunity to reflect upon our own humanity. The first, of course, I want to discuss that leads us back to our humanity is the idea of moral choice. And for that, I return to a very familiar figure. I'm a professor of medieval Italian poetry, who you see here on the screen is Italy's greatest poet, Dante Alighieri, who wrote a science fiction tale, if you will, of himself going to the afterlife, where he visits hell and he visits heaven. He gets to meet angels and demons and discuss moral choices. This is an image of him, of course, hiding behind his guide Virgil as he's being attacked by demons. Demons really only do one thing, and they don't have a choice about it. They punish. You can see that they throw people, sinners, into boiling pits of blood, into holes, into fiery pits in hell. In fact, there's even a mixed hybrid creature here named Minos, whose tail wraps around the sinners as in many times as they must be sent to a level of hell. And he does this with 2 individuals who are condemned for lust, having had an illicit affair. Here we see Paolo and Francesca, and when Dante asks the 2 of them, "What have you done to deserve this punishment?" Francesca, in a beautiful speech, says 3 times, "Love made me do it." As you can see here on the slide, it was love that kindled in my heart this emotion. It was love that did not absolve me from following this passion I have. It was love that brought us to one death. She doesn't think at all that she had a choice. She assumes that what she did, she was forced into doing, as if there were no agency. Here I give you the Italian, if only to show you that Dante, in his original native tongue of Italian, in that last line when Francesca says it was love that brought us to one death, the word for love in Italian is amor, amore. And you can see the word una and morte, which means one death in Italian, has in fact the word amor right in the middle. So Dante underscores, even in his language, the idea that one must not forget as a human that we have a choice and cannot be condemned by external circumstance or by irrational feelings. So if we don't have a choice, he warns, we end up at the very bottom in the very pit of hell with the devil. So moral choice is our first lesson in confrontation with devils and demons and hellish creatures. And that's what makes us stand apart. For the next story, we go to perspective. Perspective being another important thing that we as humans have, and for the moment, machines do not. And for that, I return to a wonderful tale, an American story known as Moby Dick. Some of you may know that the character that you see here, Captain Ahab, has one mission and one mission only, one vision of the world. He must kill the white whale, Moby Dick, who took his leg so many years before. You see him there in front of the eye of the whale. It turns out, I won't read this to you, that there is, in fact, a chapter of the book, Moby Dick, that describes the very nature of how a whale sees in the world. A sperm whale has one eye here and another eye here, and therefore sees two worlds that do not connect, and has to make sense of that somehow in their small brain. In fact, Herman Melville, the author, says that it's we as humans who have eyes in front of us that are gifted with the ability to perceive a world and make sense of it. Therefore, when we talk about the violence of the whale and how bad the whale seems to Ahab, it is put in sharp relief, in sharp contrast instead to Ahab. It's a confrontation of perspectives. It's the whale that should not be able to see with finesse the universe. It's the whale that is supposed to be seen as evil and maniacal, but instead, as you can see in these quotes, it's really Ahab who is the one motivated by hate. The book makes a strong point to say that we are all but pasteboard masks. We all hide behind some of our perspectives. Ahab there stabs as though from hell for hate's sake to try and kill the whale. And then it's written, he thinks his path is a fixed purpose laid on iron rails. He becomes a machine. He reduces himself to one view only. And if we are to remain human, we must remember that it cannot only be one view, or one view leads to shipwreck. It's perspective that we have to really claim in order for us to get to a safe and glorious port, instead of the horror that we see here. The next, I go to Frankenstein, another great and very timely book for us today, also given the implications it has for scientific inquiry left unchecked. In this book, I, however, see in the monster a willingness to be open that also evokes another unique and human quality. You see that, of course, Frankenstein, and there'll be a new movie coming out soon, has been all discussed in many different ways, and it's oftentimes only because the monster just seems so horrible. So it's odd for us to look at this story and instead to see an outcome where we can learn more about humanity from the monster than from the scientist, Victor Frankenstein, so named, who is the one at the start of it all. It's really the doctor who, infusing into a dead body, that tries to make a creation that then asks the important question, what am I? Who am I? What makes my humanity? And it's the creature who becomes open to those self-reflexive questions that really helps us to understand what defines a monster from a human. He says, I've been accustomed during the night to steal a part of their store, looking out at villagers and cottagers so that he could eat. But when I found that in doing this, I inflicted pain on the cottagers, I abstained. He learns, therefore, to see his impact in the world. He's opened to the idea that he can, with his actions, both harm and also love. He requires kindness and sympathy, he soon learns. His soul can glow with love and humanity. He then learns, however, in his loneliness, that it's his loneliness that makes him malicious. Unfortunately, he ends by saying, if you should make me happy, I shall again be virtuous. He, being open to the ideas that humans can both harm and help, learns a great deal about the flexibility and malleability of our decision-making when it comes to viewing others, and therefore once again puts in sharp relief that which is human and that which relates humanity from that which is monstrous. You can see here an image, an advanced treat of the new Frankenstein that's about to come out into film. The next quality, we move to curiosity, and for here, speaking of film, I move very quickly to a very famous face, none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger, in now a very old film, 1991, Terminator 2, a film, in fact, that speaks to the outrageousness of technology when left unchecked. In fact, the story of the Terminator, as some of you may know, is about a world which has fallen because of a technology that takes over where the machines run everything. This particular character is sent back in time to the person who invented that terrible world where machines take over, and he is supposed to save now this young inventor of technology who, when he first meets the Terminator sent to protect him, is curious about whether or not he has any feelings whatsoever. You can see him touching the skin of the Terminator here, trying to learn how he looks like a human but acts quite otherwise. Throughout the course of the movie, it is revealed, of course, that there's an ambiguity in this character. And you can see here, interestingly enough, how both in the image I last showed you of Frankenstein and this image of the Terminator, that there's a sharp relief between that which is monstrous or human and that which is robotic and human. You can see this again clearly in this particular production image. By the end of the film, however, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, the Terminator, has learned something from his human compatriot, and that is that he must, of course, learn about crying. He says, "Why do you cry?" He learns about emotion. The two characters therefore meet in the middle, and one learns about humanity from a machine, and another learns about humanity from a child. My last and final story involves empathy. Empathy is something that requires, however, a definition, you see. It's the imaginary participation in another person's experience, including emotional and intellectual dimensions, by imagining his or her perspective and by not assuming another person's perspective. Of course, this is one of my favorite films. It is E.T., again, 40 years old, but speaking of an alien who reaches Earth and meets a young boy and they bond and discover each other, you can see that this is from Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, reaching out and touching one another like Terminator 2, like E.T., and like Michelangelo forms a common theme. This is a hard-to-see image, but it's story time in E.T. one night, and the alien is in a closet listening to the mother of the young boy read to his young sister. She's reading from none other than a story about a fairy, yet another non-human creature. And it turns out this fairy is Tinkerbell, we know from Peter Pan. And Tinkerbell has swallowed a poison, and in order to be well, people need to clap their hands in order to bring her back to life. In that very moment of that story being told in the background, Elliot in the closet with E.T. hurts his finger on something sharp, and his finger begins to bleed. E.T., in this story, listening to a story about another non-human creature being brought to life once again by the belief that she is real, reaches out with his glowing finger and touches Elliot's finger and heals him. When Elliot says, "Ouch," E.T. learns and says, "Ouch," right back. And it's that bond between the alien and Elliot that carries the film and teaches how if someone not even from this planet can learn to say ouch and relate to the pain of another, then that is one of our greatest qualities as human, is our capacity to relate. And I think that we have enough work to do right here on Earth, relating to one another across cultures, across religions, across languages, across so many other boundaries. And as this film, E.T., ends with an embrace and with the phrase, "I'll be right here," he points to the heart. And I think that that is, of course, what makes us 100% human, is that in the end, not only do we have the intelligence to be able to make moral choices, to remain open, to be curious about many different things, and to think about empathy, but we have the heart to consider that perhaps one another is worth the greatest investment, and that our intentions and our emotions and our intelligence should be, to use the words of another here today, enough to elevate us all. Thank you very much for your time.